Chairman. My impression of retiring directorate civil servants, now that they are seeking for post-service outside work, there seems to be more of them than in the past. Correct me if I'm wrong. So in the civil service mechanism, we do have something called a pension, and hoping that after retirement, the civil service will not have to worry about their livelihood. So if for economic reasons they need to work afterwards, so that seems to run against the intention of providing a pension. So now that so there's only about 4 cases are rejected. About most of them seem to sell through and improved. So this will give rise to a negative perception on the part of the public, especially some of the directorate civil servants, when they apply for external outside work, or rather at big companies or conglomerates. These conglomerates and the directorate civil servants before, with the understanding reached before their retirement, these are the concerns that have been raised by my colleagues, and I believe these worries are rather concrete. I think we need to address this, otherwise the credibility of the government will fall into suspicion. Like Dr. Chung mentioned of extending the sanitization period, I think this is worth to consider. I would also like to ask that besides the vetting, would you have any sort of guidelines or even regulations that besides whether to allow them engage in particular line of work, whether do we restrict them to engaging any sort of behavior, or what should be allowed or what shouldn't be allowed? For example, would they be able to catch up with their old colleagues? So maybe just not reasonable to forbid them catching up with their old colleagues and so forth. However, when it comes to discussing things, isn't some guidelines should be in place to let them know what is allowed and what isn't? So do we have any such things in place? In Appendix C, so we talk about unpaid work. So can you brief the situation, even though this unpaid work, but we still would like to know more. Because I'm arrived late, I'm not sure if it's been covered before. But sorry for repeating. So, thank you for Mr. Yip's question. You mentioned that that the civil service has a pension, thus it should not be in a hurry to look for employment. Thus, in the 2011 review, the committee have actually looked into it, and the opinion was that the post-retirement remuneration is a reward for their long time spent in civil service rank, and should not be used as justification to deprive them to seek outside work after leaving civil service. And back then, we had give that into consideration. And so what sort of guidelines or regulations in place? So let's say for the civil service at the directorate level of having spent so many years in their ranks, and they should have a pretty good idea of what would give rise to suspicion, and thus it's very difficult to establish something like a school rules as in limiting the number of drinks you could have with your friend, or meeting how many times that would consider to be suspicious. Though we do need facts to ascertain whether these contacts would lead to perception of impropriety or collusion. I believe that everyone would have a clear idea I don't see the government could really hold your hands that, oh, what should or should not be done. If we found that there would be a case of deferred reward, we would definitely take action.